Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Remote Real Estate Investor. I'm Michael Album, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Mark Woodling. And we have a very special guest with us today. Corbin Marcotte with the Investors Broker is going to be talking to us today about all of the things we as investors should be aware of in the Tulsa, Oklahoma market. He is one of our Roofstock certified agent partners out in the Tulsa market, and I am very excited to hear what he's going to share with us about the market as a whole and what investors should be keeping their eyes peeled for as we go into a deep dive in the market. So let's get into it. Hey, Corbin, thanks so much for taking the time to come hang out with Mark and I today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're out in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right?
Correct.
And you and I were chatting a little bit before we started recording here about your background. But for those that weren't able to be part of that conversation, would love to get a little bit about your background, what you do in real estate, and kind of what the personal side of real estate for you looks like.
Right, absolutely. So I kind of have a interesting story. I actually bought my first house when I was 16 years old.
What?
Started buying stocks when I was 15, bought my first house when I was 16, and started me and my brother, we did a flip and turned it into a rental. And then we did another flip and turned it into a rental. And this is in a town outside of Tulsa, Claremore, which is a really great market. It's a little university town. And we went from there. We kind of split up. Me and him decided we didn't want to do that anymore. So at that point, I got licensed. So I was 20 years old when I got licensed and started selling real estate at that point. Went from Coldwell Banker to Keller Williams, and I built the sales team through the sales side. All the while I was doing some investing, not super aggressively, but I built the new construction. I did an owner finance deal, a couple things here and there, learned a little bit about wholesaling and things like that. And then I just really focused on the brokerage, the sales side, and I grew this team, and I just realized I wasn't having the best time. I was doing traditional sales. It was okay, but I just wasn't in it. And the things I got the most excited about were always the investment transactions. I liked analyzing the numbers. I liked seeing value add opportunity. I felt like there was more of a value creation in that area. And so at that point, I decided, I'm going to open my own brokerage. I'm going to name it the Investors Broker. And I'm going to full niche down working with investors here in the Tulsa area and probably expand out over time. We actually have an office in OKC as well, but primarily here in Tulsa, just selling investment properties. We've sold them all from large to small, little $25,000 houses up to, I did a 46 unit apartment complex not long ago. So handle them all, but I'm an investor myself. I'm actually in the office of my 9-unit apartment right now. And so I have some small apartment complexes by downtown. I've done the single family, and I've just kind of transitioned myself up. But, single family is such a great, reliable space here in Tulsa that it's hard to beat, I think.
Oh, that's awesome. I just got to know something before we move on. How does a 16-year-old buy a house? I mean, now you're making me feel bad. What was I playing with, Legos and stuff when I was 16, goofing off with friends.
It was kind of an interesting thing. My parents were regular parents. My dad was a fireman here in Tulsa. My mom managed some retail stores, things like that. So they weren't really into the financial area. And when I was young, I just decided that I was kind of rebellious as a kid. I liked to skateboard and things like that. And so I always thought about things differently, and I knew that I didn't want to work for other people my whole life. I knew I wanted to kind of do my own thing. And so I was referred some books on business when I was 15 by my brother's friend, and started reading these business books, and they opened my eyes to the world of, you can start your own business, you can be your own boss, and I loved that idea of that freedom that it provided. And so I started buying stocks. I mowed lawns. I worked for a farmer from the time I was 12. My dad was a really hard worker, so I learned from him, working hard is valuable. So I worked for this farmer. I saved up some money. Then my dad started a lawn mowing business. I saved up some money doing that. And me and my brothers went in halves and bought a house there in Claremore for $8,000 and fixed it up ourselves over the course of basically a year. And that's how it all went down.
Dude, that's awesome. That's so cool.
That's one of the best stories, Corbin, because you got to move out of your you could have moved out of your parents' house. So I almost see it as you planning for that by age 18,
yeah.
right?
I actually ended up, so years later, I had rented that house out for 4 years or something. Yeah, about 4 years. And I sold a house and I actually moved into that house and I house hacked it. I rented one of the rooms to one of my friends that was going to college there in Claremore. And so he paid my mortgage on it, and I lived there for free.
Okay, I have so many questions that I want to ask you, but I know we're here to talk about Tulsa. But the one other follow-up question I want to ask is: so you bought it with your brother for $8,000. How much did you put into it and materials? Because I know you did all the labor, but then what did it rent for?
Yeah, we did a lot of work on it. It was extensive. From the floor to the ceiling, we redid it all. And I worked for a contractor. I got a job off Craigslist working for a contractor, and I learned how to do construction. So I took that knowledge and went and fixed up the house. And he was a good enough guy that he actually helped me on some of the stuff, and lent some of his time. Honestly, one of the better contractors I've ever met. Really good guy. Helped me with that. And we put I think we were all in about $55,000, and we rented it for $950.
Dude, that's so great.
For I think the first 2 years, and then I think we bumped it up to like $1,050 or so, $1,050 for the next couple years before we sold it, and we sold it for $100,000, so we made about 45 off of it.
I love that. All right, so we could do a whole episode just about kind of your personal background, but let's dive into Tulsa here. Someone that's never been to Oklahoma, I would love for you to kind of treat me like a total newbie, because I am. Talk to me a little bit about Tulsa as a whole. Give us a 10,000-foot level of what's going on in that market. Who are some of the big employers? Why are people moving to the market or moving away? What are you seeing in the market?
Right. Tulsa, I feel like I was born in the right place at the right time, living in Tulsa and being a real estate investor and having the investor's broker. It's just an amazing real estate market right now. I've loved it because, Tulsa kind of, if you look back 5-10 years ago, really, downtown Tulsa was nothing. Nobody wanted to come to Tulsa. It was just a dead zone. And they kind of initiated this Vision 2020 for Tulsa, right? And they started it in 2008-9 roughly. And what they started doing was revitalizing downtown Tulsa. There's over in South Tulsa, there's a mall, and it's Woodland Hills Mall. That kind of used to be the hot area over there. Well, these are 80s, 90s, 2000s built homes. There's not a lot of opportunity in those. For turnkey, they can be great. And don't get me wrong, depending on the model, that area has some great property. But the downtown area started getting revitalized, and it took all of these areas that had been really C-class property for a long time and started making it, B to A class, so rapid appreciation. And Tulsa with the George Kaiser Family Foundation, which if you've looked at Tulsa, it's one of the top things you'll hear about. He donated $256 million and built the Gathering Place, which has been ranked the best U.S. attraction for several years. It's a free park that's hundreds of acres. It's amazing. It's like a free amusement park almost. Kids love it. There's ponds. It's right on the river. And so they did this massive development over there that's just this amazing spot. That got us national attention. And then downtown Tulsa, his foundation as well. Obviously, he's an oil guy, being from the old oil capital of the world is what Tulsa is known as. He has a foundation that funds for artists to move to Tulsa, and he also has Tulsa Remote. So he's been paying people $10,000 to move to Tulsa. If they meet a criteria, most of those are their economic drivers. These are people that do real estate stuff. They're people that own their own businesses. They're driving the economy, and they're remote workers. And then he's been giving them a $10,000 bonus to buy a house in Tulsa. And so that's been amazing. They just brought in another 1,000 people on that program, and that's been great. Tulsa's economy's just been doing wonderful. We just opened it was the largest hiring of people in Tulsa, was the Amazon Center that just opened up. You know, we got national attention. Tesla was looking at building their Cybertruck facility here. We came in second behind Austin. And, you know, people are like, oh, it's too bad you didn't get it. Well, that got us national attention. So all of these big companies, when they see that Tesla's thinking about moving here, they're going, okay, why are they thinking about it? Well, because they realize the cost of land, the cost of the property, the tax rates, everything like that makes it a very attractive place to live. You know, they can find 1,000 acres that's within 25 minutes of downtown Tulsa, which is the cool spot to be. So they want their workers to have a place to go to, like downtown Tulsa. It's attracted a lot of stuff. Some of our largest industries are like aerospace. American Airlines just did a huge expansion out at the airport. You know, it's like in Tulsa, everybody jokes, everybody knows somebody that works at American Airlines because it's such a large employer here. There's, you know, the energy sector, obviously. There's a lot of oil and gas, and because we were the oil capital of the world, you know, in the early 1900s, people think, is that all that's in Tulsa? But really, that's not even the biggest sector in Tulsa. Aerospace is bigger than the energy sector in Tulsa, which they're also doing some really cool innovations with energy. I think there's going to be some changing from oil and gas to some of the newer technologies. A lot of that's being developed here. Then there's healthcare, there's technology. DirecTV is a giant employer here in Tulsa. Bank of Oklahoma, and yeah, those are some of the major employers here in Tulsa. It's kind of a broad view. And, you know, we were just in Forbes for being the 4th fastest appreciating real estate market in the U.S. So another national attention, which is, I mean, prices, it's gone up, you know, 25% in the past year, roughly. And depending on the neighborhood and everything, of course, but just rapid expansion in Tulsa. Wow. And rents have gone up too. You know, owning my properties, you know, I've seen a 3-bed, 1-bath, you know, last year in the areas I'm in, I would have thought was, you know, about $900. Just rented a 3-bed, 1-bath for $1,400.
Holy smokes.
So getting some dramatic rent increases as well.
I was just on a website called tulsasfuture.com. And it's basically the economic development group that just compiles a bunch of data. And it said that the cost of living is 12% below the national average. So if you have rent increases that are hanging in there, but it's still a low cost of living, it's kind of a win-win, right? You're bringing in people that, you know, can still afford and not spending their whole paycheck on their rent, but the rent is going up, which is great for you. So compared to the price of housing, that's kind of the win-win situation.
Yeah, it's just so affordable to live here, you know. And even, you know, our cost of transportation, everything around Tulsa is just affordable, which is one of the reasons I like it so much, you know. I mean, you can get a house people can buy a nice house for $150,000, you know, and then they can turn around and rent it out for $1,500. So, you know, there's good rates of return, steady appreciation. And, you know, one of my favorite books, The ABCs of Real Estate Investing, in there he talks about, you know, talk to the Chamber of Commerce, talk to the people in the city, and that's where you'll hear, should I invest in this market? You talk to the people at the Chamber of Commerce, and they're stoked on what's happening in Tulsa. I mean, they're thrilled, and it's because of all these great things, all these great partnerships. And downtown's became, you know, I moved downtown because it's became an amazing entertainment area. Every night of the week there's things to do. There's wonderful restaurants. You know, in 2020, we were set to open 25 restaurants were coming just to the downtown Tulsa area. So tons of new places opening up. Of course, 2020 kind of threw a wrench in those plans, but many of them still opened. And also, that's another, you know, economic factor is the way the government and everything's handled the coronavirus in Tulsa. our eviction processes has stayed fairly easy if you do have trouble. I bought a complex that had existing problem tenants in it, and I was able to get those people out in 30 days. It cost me about $200 to get them out. Whereas, if you're looking at some of these coastal states, you're paying thousands of dollars. It takes you a year to get somebody out of a property. You're losing all that rent. Here it's like you might miss out on a month worth of rent if somebody starts, not being a great tenant. And so the process for that's very easy. It's a landlord-friendly state. And, we didn't close down. Our restaurants, things like that, didn't close down in Tulsa. And so our economy kept going.
So Corbin, you kind of touched on it a little bit already, but curious to dig in a little bit deeper. So for investors that are looking for cash flowing properties, I mean, what are the different kind of neighborhoods or submarkets within Tulsa that people should be aware of? And then what is your average, I'm doing air quotes for anyone not watching this on YouTube, what's the average purchase price that someone could expect for, call it a 3.2, because that's kind of our, Colt 45. And then what would the rent look like in some of those different submarkets?
Right. So there's a West Tulsa. Tulsa's grid is set up very efficiently. So when you go to learn Tulsa, it's a very easy city to learn. We have downtown, and then there's East Tulsa, West Tulsa, Midtown, South Tulsa.
Easy enough.
That's pretty much the breakup. Yep, very easy. And West Tulsa, there's a lot more manufacturing on the west side. So it's a lot more blue-collar style. There's tons of manufacturing plants on the west side. I actually live just west of downtown, so I'm kind of over in that area. And, you're going to look at, purchase prices over there for a 3.2 or maybe around 120. It's maybe, the blue-collar style. It's going to be a little lower price point. And those are renting for probably $1,500, $1,500 a month on that side of town. That's west. And then East Tulsa, east of Tulsa, there's a chunk of other kind of manufacturing stuff. There's a lot of construction workforce over there, things like that. And so that area, it's kind of similar, maybe a little higher price point. The houses tend to be a little bigger over there. So the houses in West Tulsa, a lot of your average house, is around 1,000 to 1,200 square foot for a 3-bed, 2-bath. On the east side, it's more like, 1,500 to 1,800 square foot for their 3-bed, 2-baths. Larger houses. And those, they're selling for around $150 for a 3.2, and they're renting out for $1,500, $1,600 a month. Midtown is kind of a higher price point. Everybody, we make fun of the Midtown people because they're all fancy, and it's a nice neighborhood. That's where you get close to that Gathering Place Park I mentioned. Brookside's over there. Really nice area. There's some really high-end stuff in that area. They call it the old money part of Tulsa. And there's some really big houses, but, you can find houses. You're getting like a 3-bed, 2-bath. They're around $210 for a small 3-bed, 2-bath in that area. And their rents are going to be higher. They're going to be closer to $1,800 a month or so. So you're not getting quite the return, but really great area, really great appreciation. And, they never have any trouble selling or renting out the high end. They're more A-class, I would say the Midtown area is. South Tulsa, that's new money. And so that's the, a lot of larger houses. That's like the Jinx area, the South Tulsa, the Bixby area. That's where a lot of new construction pushed out and the higher end in South Tulsa. So, it's hard to find a house for under $250 in that area. And they're bringing rents, $2,200 a month, things like that. Jinx is the best rated school district around. That's in the South Tulsa area. So that area is just really nice, and a lot of high-end restaurants and nice things like that over in that area.
Right on.
So, Michael, I wanted to ask a quick question to Corbin. So, so the listeners at home really understand who you are. You're a part of the Certified Agent Network. So you're basically one of our partners, but you're the one that identifies the properties that go on to Roofstock that are in the Roofstock Select program. So
Right.
maybe, if they go there today, they could see probably about 20 properties that are in the Tulsa market, but you're the one that handpicked them. So maybe give a little idea to the listeners of, what you were looking at when you were identifying some of those properties, because there's quite a bit of variety, kind of, north, south, east, and west that you picked out.
Yeah. I like to appeal to everybody, and everybody has different choices in what they're looking at. Some people aren't very comfortable with an older house. Some people are very comfortable with an older house. And like there's no old houses in South Tulsa, So just picking properties based on, for the class of property, we got to meet a criteria of a return on investment. And the nicer the property, obviously, we can accept a little lower return because there's not as much CapEx. It's going to be a nicer property. You may be paying a little more in taxes on those properties, but trying to set it up so that, there's a diverse group. And if you're comfortable with a little B class, we don't really do what I would call like C or the lower end. We really try and stay, maybe the lowest we do is like C plus, low B, and then up from there, and give that spectrum from where you can get a higher return, but the property may be a little older, it may need a water tank. There may be things like that down the road that are going to happen sooner than buying these nicer, higher end homes, and trying to make sure we get that right rate of return for the investors.
That's great.
Awesome.
And in that same vein, Corbin, what do property taxes look like in Tulsa? And maybe if there's different counties that make up Tulsa. And then a second part of that is, what expenses might be unique to Tulsa that investors should be aware of?
It's funny. I talk to people from out of state all the time, obviously, and I think when I was first talking to Mark, I was telling him about our taxes here. Our taxes are very affordable compared to most places. When I talk to people from Dallas or, anywhere in that area, their taxes are almost double or triple what we're paying here. For a $150,000 house, I kind of look at like $1,500 roughly.
Okay.
For taxes. Yeah, right in that range. I kind of base off like a 1% rule type thing. It's kind of roughly what to expect.
Okay. That makes the math really easy. And then is there any kind of reassessment or change in the property taxes year over year?
Yeah, I believe that in Tulsa, the most they can bump is 2% a year. Now, whenever a property transfers ownership, obviously they're going to reassess based on the value it was purchased. So, depending on the last time that property was sold, if it was sold 20 years ago, the taxes are probably going to bump fairly well on that purchase. Now, if it was sold 2 years ago, it's not going to be a very much difference in the tax rate.
That's great to know. So for everybody listening, this is a super critical point, because I know a lot of investors and I talk to a lot of investors and they'll say, well, I go on Zillow and I look at the historic tax that's been paid over the last couple of years. And to your point exactly, if that house was purchased 15, 20 years ago, the tax rate is going to be based on that purchase price. So we need to bring that forward into today's dollars at today's purchase price to get an understanding of what your future taxes are going to be. So great point. Thanks for clarifying.
Right. And there's, just to hit on the counties, most of Tulsa is Tulsa County. But if you happen to step to some of these other areas, we post in the suburbs of Tulsa too, because everywhere is a 25-minute drive in Tulsa. We don't have any traffic. It's like I can go to Claremore in 25 minutes, and that's a great rental market. We just sold one on Roofstock in Sapulpa, which is just right outside Tulsa. Great rental market. Good area. And she really got a stellar house, actually. I was like, oh, this place is nice. It was freshly remodeled. But those counties like Rogers County, Wagner County, Osage County, they're going to have cheaper taxes than Tulsa. So your percentage wise is quite a bit less. My property's in Osage County, and they haven't realized how much work I've done to it. So I'm on the low end, but I think they have me assessed at like 100,000, and I think I pay like $600 a year in taxes. $550 a year in taxes is what I paid last year. So
Wow.
some of those outlying counties are very cheap in taxes.
Okay. Also good to know.
In addition to some of those taxes, real quick, what are the common things that you see on the inspection report that come up that maybe is a little bit more customary for your local market that shouldn't scare buyers, but they're going to see it and it's going to be something that's kind of par for the course?
Yeah. Termites is one. In Oklahoma, we have and I'm not an exterminator, but just kind of paraphrasing what I've been told by exterminators, is in Oklahoma we have very slow moving termites. And so, but they're everywhere. There's no avoiding termites in Oklahoma. They're everywhere. They give a number on how many colonies per square mile in Oklahoma. So it's not if, it's when are termites going to hit your property. But because they're so slow moving, as long as you're taking care of treatment on a regular basis, it's almost never going to affect you. So as long as you get it treated, have a termite inspection. I definitely recommend a termite inspection, and have it treated, once a year. They'll come out, they'll do a spray, and that'll take care of that problem and kind of protect you. Now, I have seen properties where nobody did anything for 100 years and they're eaten up, but I mean, this building I'm in, my 9 unit, I had termite damage in here, and this building was built in 1920, so it's 100 years old. And, we were able to rip out and replace the wood rot, and it wasn't too extensive and it's never been treated. Over time, they just kind of move on to the next thing. So, that's definitely something to watch for. Roofs, we get a lot of hail here in the Tulsa area. So, making sure that the roof's checked out, checking for hail damage. That's an opportunity where if there's hail damage, likely the seller only has to pay their deductible. So you might be able to negotiate for a new roof if there's hail damage or wind damage. There is wind. We were talking about the tornadoes beforehand, and everybody from out of state's like, tornadoes, it's gonna be crazy, the movie Twister, and it's really, I mean, so rare that a property gets damaged by a tornado, but we do get a chunk of wind damage. Primarily, that's on roofs, and so just making sure that the shingles, it's pretty apparent. Often they'll curl. Things like that. That's another insurance claim setup. So making sure that you have the proper insurance when you buy the property that's going to take care of that roof with a fair deductible is going to be important. I would say everything else is pretty customary. Little leaky faucets and little things here and there that are wrong. On the one we just did, the front porch posts were old. One thing to think about too in Oklahoma is almost nobody puts gutters on houses, and it's beyond me. It drives me crazy. Every time I buy a property, I immediately put gutters on the place because, that's going to be the number one cause of foundation issues is poor drainage. And so getting that water away from the house is very important. A handful of them do, but I'm always watching out for gutters to make sure I'm getting that water away from the house.
Maybe it's the foundation contractors that are in cahoots with the home builders that say, all right, we'll pay you not to put gutters on it because we'll be in business later.
Right. Yeah. It's crazy. I've had so many people, buy here and they're like, there's no gutters on anything, but they're very affordable. I just did a house with a walkout basement, and it was about 1,200 square foot upstairs and another chunk downstairs, and 2-story on the backside, and it cost me $950 to put gutters on it. So that can be a good investment for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
I was going to ask a little bit about competition because we can get into the real estate deals all day, and the properties that you see on Roofstock are either exclusive listings, but the ones that you're identifying are the ones on MLS. So how competitive of a market is it? How much inventory is on the market? And what's a realistic expectation for a buyer that wants to come in and make an offer and say, hey, what's going to be an offer that can compete? So what do buyers need to know there?
Yeah. Like most everywhere else right now, it's challenging. We submit a lot of offers and don't get a ton accepted. You got to submit several offers before you're going to get one accepted because people are there's a lot of migration happening to Tulsa. And so there's a lot of people that have sold homes in states with much higher real estate prices, and then they come here and buy houses in cash. And they can't believe how cheap it is for how nice of a house it is. And so they'll pay, $20,000 over asking price. So that can be challenging. A lot of what I try and target, though, are not those properties. I'm trying to target properties that, maybe are more attractive as rental properties than they are for, a personal residence. Like one of those opportunities can be in Oklahoma, everybody drives big trucks and stuff like that, so garages are really important. We're like the do-it-yourself state, everybody changes their own oil and builds stuff and everything like that. So it's like everybody wants a garage, Well, if you have a rental property, I would say most of the rental properties don't have garages. So, a house without a garage, you're going to be more likely to get an offer accepted because you're not competing against the people that are buying to live there and they're willing to pay more, whereas we're looking at return on investment, and really you're not going to get much more of a return for having a garage. So if anything, it almost offsets because you pay more and you don't quite get that same bump. So that's one of the opportunities is locating those properties that, you're not as competitive against, but full price offers are to be expected, even on the properties that, have those little nuances that maybe make them better rental properties. Whenever I get an offer, I'll look it over, I'll look at the property, I'll talk to the other agent, and then I'll reach out. I'll send an email to the buyer. I might give them a call depending on how hurry it is. And I'll tell them, here's what I'm thinking. I see you submitted this offer, but I talked to the agent and he says there's 5 other offers coming in. If you really want this house, if your numbers can make sense, I might suggest we make a higher offer. And of course, it's up to the client at that point what they want to do. But I want to empower them with that information so they can realize, okay, and you never know. You never know. That's one of the challenges of the way the market is right now. You don't know if somebody's going to offer $20,000 over. All you can do is run your numbers and make your best offer, And then
That's right.
Some of these properties I upload, maybe they've been on for 30 days or so. I feel like one of the rare markets where some of the properties, maybe they were rented out and they just got a tenant out. Some different things like that where some of these properties have sat on the market for longer. Or maybe they had it listed too high and they finally started doing some price reduction. So it's been on the market for 30 days, 60 days. Those properties, we can offer a little less than asking price a lot of the time and still win those deals. It's all about me filling out how many other people are looking at this right now, and what do we need to do to make sure we get the best deal possible.
So just setting a realistic expectation, and I know list prices are, sometimes they're high, sometimes they're low, but when looking at a property, what's the average percentage of list price that offers are getting accepted at that, just give a little context to the buyers?
About the average is about 105% in the current market, 105% of list price to sales price.
Yeah. Great to know.
Interesting. Yeah, we hear that across a lot of the markets that we're in right now. So, and then my last question is, do you have iBuyers? Do you have institutional buyers in the area? Or are you really up against the mom and pop investors and then owner occupants?
So we're starting to be looked at, and I've had some conversations. Obviously I'm one of the first people they talk to when they see the name of the brokerage. And so I'm starting to talk to some of those larger institutions, but really Tulsa hasn't met their metric yet, and that's 1 million people basically is their metric. And we haven't surpassed that. So a lot of those larger places are not looking at Tulsa. So a lot of it's competing against, smaller time investors, people without that much leverage. But they're starting to move in slowly, and I think now is a good time for Tulsa because 5 years from now, it's going to be hit by all those people, and that I've already seen it happen. The out-of-state investors, because of the solid properties and good deals, they're moving in. They're moving money into Tulsa, and it's driving up prices, and once it hits the level where the institutional investors can come in, they're going to make another big push. We're going to hit a whole new level of, the real estate market here. So I really think now's a good time because it's going to be drove up once that does happen in full force.
And that's one of the reasons why we called you to bring these properties on from the MLS. And knowing, your brokerage is what caught my eye too. So I'll be the first to say I fell for it. So good job. but you're backing it up with this expertise. But yeah, I was just studying again that Tulsa's Future website. They said that Tulsa MSA comprises of 7 counties, and it's an aggregate population of 995,000 people. So right when it hits that million mark or whenever the next census update is, get ready. It's going to take off.
To the moon.
Yeah, we're right below it. And so I think that's kind of got some of them starting to go, wait, they're close enough, but a chunk of them, they just have this system and it doesn't meet that number. So they're not there yet, but there's a lot happening.
To me, if there's no iBuyers and there's less institutional capital, this is our chance to bring, out-of-state buyers in without having that crazy amount of competition like you would have in Dallas and Houston and Charlotte and Atlanta and some of those bigger markets. So yeah, I think this is a sweet spot for sure.
Yeah, and one more positive I see of Tulsa is, historically, because we're a very steady location, we don't have these crazy fluctuations, historically. I'm not saying it's not possible, but we have not had these crazy market fluctuations. We're just kind of slow and steady, and just more people move in, more businesses open up. It's a real steady market compared to a lot of places in the U.S.
And I'm curious, Corbin, does the investor's broker also have property management connections or a property management arm of the business?
Right. I work with property managers. I did the property management and I pulled back to just do it for myself. So I leave that to the pros. It's one of those businesses that what I found is you almost want somebody who has a large property management business because they've earned the level of efficiency it takes. And to run a large property management business, you have to be efficient because their margins aren't huge. It's a wild game to be in. So, Key Renter's one of them I work with, Renter's Place, I think the most recent one was like Ascension. So there's some really good property managers here in the Tulsa area that I would definitely recommend people to.
Fantastic.
And if people need contacts for insurance agents, I have a gutter guy. I got some contacts like that. So if somebody needs something, I'm more than willing to, refer them and let them make their own decision.
Great. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest hurdles that folks are trying to overcome being out of state or remote investors is, I love the Tulsa market. It sounds great, but I don't know anybody there. So reaching out to someone like yourself or utilizing some of Roofstock's contacts hopefully can overcome that pretty easily for folks.
What are the expectations that you have as an agent that you really need buyers to be prepared for? What is it that's going to help them say, I'm ready to invest in Tulsa, or I'm ready to start purchasing, any properties through you on Roofstock?
I've had a really good experience in working with everyone from Roofstock because of your educational piece. I think people understand urgency is going to be a big deal. Once you get that over, When I send the paperwork, we got to get it signed. We got to get it submitted because there's these offer deadlines. There's things like that. And so just being quick about handling everything, earnest money, it's going to be wire transferred from out-of-state buyers. So, making sure that's done within the 48-hour deadline is really one of the main things of ensuring happens. But other than that, just being quick on the draw. And have the conversation. If you have questions, if you're wondering, what should I bump this offer up? Where am I at? Please send an email, and I'll let you know exactly what my thoughts are on it.
Awesome.
That's awesome. And you have another employee that's coming on board that's going to be working with you on the Roofstock account named Garrett Ayers. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. Garrett's been a longtime friend. Me and him had a real estate team back in the day at Keller Williams when we were there. He's a smart guy. He loves the investment space, and he's been doing some traditional sales, but he's to the point where he's ready to make the jump and go all on the investment side. So he's actually in the moving over process right now, and he has much more availability of time and things like that, and is just very diligent and very ethical, solid guy that I could trust anything with. So I think he's going to be a really, really great added benefit. He actually comes from the tech industry, so locating deals is almost a good niche for him. He's able to find those nuances, and he's great on really digging in on the computer. So I think it's going to be really great to have him on.
Oh, that's good to hear. Very excited to see where you and Garrett go. And just the last thing for our listeners, Corbin, if folks want to reach out to you, have additional questions, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Yeah, probably my email address, which is Corbin, Corbin, at TIB, like the investors broker, realty.com.
Awesome. Well, Corbin, thank you again for taking the time to hang out with Mark and I and answer all of our questions. We're getting giddy over here, so I got to let you go. But we look forward to staying in touch.
Awesome, Corbin. Hey, thanks for joining us.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Awesome, everybody. That was our show. A big, big, big thank you to Corbin. A lot of fun. I know that I learned a ton about the Tulsa market. I will be definitely doing some deeper dives into the market as a whole and having some follow-up conversations with Corbin and his team. As always, if you liked the episode, please feel free to leave us a rating or review wherever it is you listen to the podcast. And if you're checking us out on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe or leave us a comment on any kind of episode that you want to hear in the future.